Week number 15 in the NFL is just about in the books. We got drama across fantasy football. We got drama across the National Football League. I'm not sure if Toxic is in the chat yet, but he and I in a duel to move on in the Vampire League. He a dominant number 1 seed, me a plucky underdog as the 8th seed, and I need basically exactly 10 points from Darnell Mooney tonight. Also needing a good game from Bijan Robinson and a bad game from the Falcons defense. One of those seems more likely than the other, but we'll get into all of that. In the chat, for those watching live on twitch.tv/primetimepk, give me your thoughts in whether you want some fantasy football thoughts, what killed you in fantasy football this week, or any of your thoughts in the chat. By all means, let me know. But let's begin with what was the game of the day, and that was the Buffalo Bills with another big win, this time over the Detroit Lions, and it always felt like the Lions were trying to keep up in this game. And I mean, scoreboard-wise, they were. But just from a on-field standpoint, too, it just felt like they were chasing the entire matchup. And the Buffalo Bills, I think, showing that they may be, I don't want to say a class above, because I think that is probably reading too much into what we saw on Sunday afternoon. But I think you saw that once again, Josh Allen was the best player in a football game, and he was just brilliant, I thought, in that game again, and a really, really strong performance from him and this Buffalo Bills team. I said the ESPN headline today, did Josh Allen lock up the MVP? Yes, he has. He has done it. Saquon, I just don't think can get there. Lamar Jackson, I don't think the Ravens will get there. You could have, if Jared Goff would have come in here and won this game, and he didn't lose it for them. Let's be very clear about that. But if Jared Goff would have come in here and the Lions would have won this game, I think that there would have been a very compelling case for Jared Goff, narrative-wise anyway, to be the MVP. But this is Josh Allen's award now. I think we can all lock that up. The big takeaway on the Lions side is that this defense continues to get banged up. And I personally overrated them coming into this game, and thought that they maybe would give the Buffalo Bills a little bit more trouble. Right now, nothing is slowing Josh Allen down, but this defense isn't slowing a lot down. They get even more banged up, and now, as we look ahead to the rest of the season, and we'll do a bit of a season look ahead coming up on Wednesday, but as we look ahead to the rest of the season and then into the playoffs, can this defense get the stops that they need to get this team to a Super Bowl? Because they are going to be playing probably a couple pretty good offenses along the way in the NFC. Can this defense come up with a big stop at a big time, given the big injuries that they are dealing with right now? Moving on, all of a sudden, as Toxic is saying in the chat, Patrick Mahomes pulling a Mark Stone. All of a sudden, some drama around the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes spraining his ankle, putting some doubt into his availability on Saturday against the Texans, and then on Christmas against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a roll or an ankle sprain, like I said before, coming in a victory over the Cleveland Browns. I think right now, given that the Bills lost to the Rams a couple of weeks ago, there is some breathing room for the Chiefs atop the AFC. The Texans haven't been the most spectacular team anyway. A good team. Like, I don't think you can go, we can beat them with Carson Wentz. But I do think that given you have this 3 games in 10 days stretch here with Mahomes, and I don't want to say it means nothing, because it does mean a little bit, with the Bills still kind of nipping at your heels a little bit, and with Buffalo playing some really, really good football. I do believe that the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, they can't just, fold up tent, we got this, we're good. But I do think that Mahomes sitting for one of these games makes sense. And I think sitting him against the Texans is the one that makes the most sense. Now, yes, bringing him back on maybe a bad ankle against the Steelers probably doesn't help you all that much. But I think getting the 1 seed is still important, but making sure Patrick Mahomes is healthy is the absolute obvious, no matter what, 100% most important thing for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm not there. I'm not the doctor, but I think having him sit, giving him basically a bye week until next Wednesday so he doesn't have to play on a tight turnaround, on a tight ankle, I think that is probably the best way to go if you are the Kansas City Chiefs. And it just, from a Bills standpoint, that loss against the Rams, it was a wild one and it was fun and all of that, but it makes that loss, I think, sting just a little bit more because you could be potentially in the driver's seat for that number 1 seed, which I do think will be important when we get down to late January in the AFC title game. The Miami Dolphins remain not for real is the headline I have here. The Tua situation is interesting because he is, like, just on this team, so clearly the best option, right? And I think you saw that he is not a bum as a quarterback because you saw bums at quarterback and what this offense looked like, and they couldn't move the ball for shit. And then he came in and this offense started to go and the train started to move on time a little bit more. But now I think you have seen that there is a ceiling to that. And I have been a Tua supporter. I still think that there is a pretty talented quarterback there, and look, he'd be the most talented quarterback on my team. But in terms of getting a team to a championship and getting a team to a next level, I don't think he is that guy. And I think the Dolphins kind of need him to be that guy. And he's not. He's, again, clearly a good quarterback. Not a great one, though. On the other side of that game, the Houston Texans got a much-needed win, but still not overly impressive. It's just nothing looks easy for them. That's the best way I could describe it. Nothing is coming easy for this team, especially on the offensive side of the football this year. It has been a really tough watch, and they have had to grind their way to a number of different victories. And now, look, when they get there, like they're still winning. That is the main thing. And they are playing, I guess, kind of a playoff style of football to get ready for it. But as the playoffs stand right now, taking a look at it at this exact moment. Oh, my wife is calling me. That's awkward. Someone doesn't get the notifications. But as it sits right now, what was I even looking? Oh, right. Playoff matchups. It is the Houston Texans. They've clinched their division. Congratulations. Very happy for you. They would play the Baltimore Ravens in the first round. I think the Ravens would be favored, and I would pick the Ravens to win that game. They just can't keep up offensively right now. So I think that there is some concern on the Texans side. I don't think a long-term thing. I still think CJ Stroud is good. I don't think we're having oh man, maybe Bryce Young is better. I don't think we're having those conversations or anything like that. But it needs to get better, and it needs to get better very quickly for this Texans team, which probably means it won't going into the playoffs. The Denver Broncos poured on late against the Indianapolis Colts, working the Broncos hitman game down at the Dome with Gino DePaoli being able to hang out there was just a blast. And I'll talk about that game. Hopefully we'll have time to talk about that game at the end of the show. If not, we'll carve out some time later on in the day. But we were doing the out-of-town scoreboard and stuff like that, and it's, oh man, Colts are beating the Broncos 13-10. What's going on? That's a bit of a bummer. And then, like, by the time the next intermission comes around, it's 31-13 for the Broncos. Like, what the hell is going on? And then you see it's a trick play that doesn't go well. Obviously, it was earlier in the game, but it's Jonathan Taylor fumbling a touchdown. It was a disaster on the Colts side. And for the Broncos, it's a big win. The defense comes up big. They did well. On the Colts side of things, I do think I think we have far past the thought that they have a quarterback problem. Anthony Richardson, he needs experience, but right now he just isn't it. He isn't getting it. There are a lot of fascinating tools, but there are a lot of really, really bad mistakes that are causing some problems at this time. And so I think it's going to be an interesting offseason for them because they have a lot of high-end talent on this football team, but they have a lot of holes, and this defense is just not that good. They have a lot of problems out there, but they have a lot of things that you can get excited about too, and a gigantic question mark at the quarterback spot. Bit of an eye-opening loss for the Los Angeles Chargers in this game. Baker Mayfield just picked them apart. And look, like the offense struggled against this Bucs defense, and most don't struggle against this Bucs defense. You don't want to overreact to one loss. And I think this probably goes from the Chargers are a team that you think would lose in the first round of the playoffs to the Chargers are a team you think are going to lose in the first round of the playoffs. Like, I don't think this dramatically changes the landscape of anything for the Chargers, but going into the postseason, it was okay that the defense is good and maybe they can steal some stuff. And Justin Herbert, he's starting to click and this offense is starting to go. And yeah, they can't run the ball for shit, but they can move the ball through the air and that's great. And now you see that and it's, ooh boy. And from a fantasy standpoint, I know that he had, he was one that we were talking about as a must start, and you can even trust the receiving options there. And so that probably didn't help a whole lot of fantasy teams. Toxic, thanks for letting me know about the notifications thing either. I thought we had that figured out, but I guess not. On the Bucs side of things, this was, I think, a really nice statement from them. They won a couple of games, and that was good. Like, they beat the Raiders, they beat the Panthers, but it was a couple of games that was like, boy, those are not great teams that you're struggling to beat, and we're picking you to win this division now, so what's going on with that? That they were able to really, I think, put that to bed, because this was a good defense that they did this to, and Baker Mayfield put on a show. That was really interesting to see from him on Sunday afternoon. The Pittsburgh Steelers validating my power rankings, so thank you to them. I think this showed that they are a good team, but they are not among the elites, and I think keeping them out of that top four was the right move on my part. They just, and look, Pickens, I don't think he is a real number one, but I think this offense really struggles without him, and I think you saw that this team, the Russell Wilson thing, it's been fun. And the defense is really good, but there are still some flaws and there are still some issues with this team that keeps them from being that number one group. So we will see if they can get that sorted out. They obviously have a great coach. They have a couple big games coming up here as the season winds down. But on the Eagles side of things, that was a statement I thought that they made against the Steelers. It was an impressive performance against a really, really strong football team. And one that I just said, like, that they're not among the elites, but that's still a difficult team to look good against. And you get some touchdown celebrations and all of that. Now, a couple of injury issues potentially late in this game. Saquon Barkley came up holding his ankle, it kind of seemed, and A.J. Brown was on the wrong end of a hip drop tackle. That wasn't called. And it ended up not affecting things here, but we will see what the injury report says about those two players going into either the fantasy semifinals or a very important game for the Eagles, because now they are tied with Detroit for a shot at the number one seed in the NFC, and that very, very important first round bye. But also, talking about the importance of things, how different does it look for the NFC Championship game, either having to go into the Dome in Detroit to play that Lions team, or getting to host it outside in the cold and misery of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania? That's where home field advantage really comes in. So that number one seed is going to be really, really important for the Philadelphia Eagles. Staying in that division, this one, like, the scoreboard looks a little bit closer than it was, just because of a late run by the Saints, and then some clock issues that maybe made it a little bit closer than it seemed. But still, I have stated before that I have respect for the Saints defense, but I still think that the Commanders probably should have been able to move the ball a little bit more effectively against the Saints. And this was one that I was just kind of like glancing at and didn't see a ton of. So maybe when I go back and fully sit down and watch it, we'll see something different there. But this is, I think, a defense, or this is a Saints defense that will give teams problems, but this is a Commanders offense that hasn't mattered against. And so I do think as this season is going on, this Commanders team is kind of fading back to the pack a little bit. And now those teams that are battling for top spot in the NFC West, they are right at the door, knocking on for a chance to get into the playoffs, with the Commanders trying to hold them off. So that's going to be, all of a sudden, we have a couple playoff races showing up, at least on the NFC side. And then Sunday Night Football, the real Green Bay Packers show up. This was the team we were looking for. Offensively, it's still not perfect, but Josh Jacobs is a beast, and they at least were able to get the weapons involved enough that they were able to put on a good performance against a Seahawks defense that I was buying as for real, and was looking like they were for real for a little bit. So to put up that showing against that defense is allowing me to take Green Bay a little bit more seriously once again here in the NFC playoff race. And I think that they are going to get into a point where they are going to be team you don't want to face in the playoffs category. So it should be fun to see what they do. On the Seahawks side, once again, a lot of flaws show up. Geno Smith gets hurt, and the offensive line issues really show up. Sam Howell was just obliterated back there in the pocket by a Green Bay pass rush that isn't exactly elite or a dangerous unit in this league or anything like that. And so watch out for that. But I do think that you shouldn't let the injury thing fool you. This offense didn't look very good, even with Geno in there. And we just remember the last little bit, and okay, well, it ends up being a blow, but Geno got hurt. Like, no, it was 20-3 at halftime, and Geno was in there. And then he gets banged up, and then it kind of goes sideways on them. So there are, I think, some kind of legitimate concerns again around the consistency of this offense. And we had forgotten about them for a little bit, but now they pop up. The one thing, I don't get why DK Metcalf isn't more involved in this offense. It is so quiet. And look, I was touting JSN from the beginning of the season and had him in the Vampire League, and maybe he's going to get me a win this week. We'll see what Darnell Mooney does tonight. But the fact that he is just the de facto number one and DK Metcalf, this superhuman player, isn't getting any looks is nothing short of very surprising to me. So we will see what this offense can do. But they were a team that felt like they were in the driver's seat after that win against Arizona. And now all of a sudden they're on the outside looking into the playoffs because the Rams are rolling. And this was the time of year I thought the Rams were going to fall off, but everyone's gotten healthy now for them, and they have been able to stay within striking distance. A phenomenal job by them has them now feeling like they're in the driver's seat in the NFC West. Still a couple of games left on the schedule tonight. It is the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Chicago Bears. We did this on the weekend preview, but the Vikings, I think this defense puts on a show against the Bears. I think Chicago's offensive line issues combined with a Brian Flores defense makes for a very long night for Caleb Williams. And so the Vikings, I have them to kind of round out a parlay this week. That would be a nice little win on what was easily for me the most profitable weekend of the NFL season. So that was really nice to see. Both on like the actual picks and some DraftKings work as well. But still, the Vikings, I think, put on a show here and put it away. And in the other Monday Night Football game, it is, my boys, the Raiders, taking on the Atlanta Falcons. It's a must-win for the Atlanta Falcons, and I think it's the last straw for Kirk Cousins. If this team doesn't look impressive against the Raiders, or even loses, then it is the Michael Penix era in Atlanta. They had a real comfortable lead for top spot in this division, and it has fallen off, and Kirk Cousins has looked abysmal. And now this team, if they lose this game, they're basically done. And it's against the Raiders team that doesn't have Max Crosby, which means they don't have talent on the defensive side. This should be a big game for the Atlanta Falcons, and it is a monster spot for Kirk Cousins if he wants to remain the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. So that is the Week 15 story in the NFL. Toxic, both of us had all-stars on our bench. Man, Brian Thomas Jr., that one, that one, if I end up losing this, which I probably will, that one's going to haunt me for a very long time. But how can you assume? How can you put your trust in a guy who has Mac Jones throwing him the football for your fantasy championship, or fantasy playoff anyway? But that is the joy of the fantasy football world. We'll have a lot of fantasy football talk coming up on the show tomorrow with the waiver wire look and the fantasy football dumpster darlings. A few very good candidates as we go into the last couple of games of the week.